His name is Joe Banister, and he was a special Treasury agent assigned to the IRS to investigate people that were filing fraudulent tax returns or simply hiding assets. And thanks a lot for spending some time with us, Mr. Banister. God bless.
Thanks, Alex.
Basically, just start out and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you stumbled upon the truth.
Well, I started out as a CPA. I worked in public accounting, and I decided that I wanted a little more excitement, and decided to become a law enforcement officer in the federal government. Well, the Internal Revenue Service's his job is to collect income taxes and some excise taxes, and the Criminal Investigation Division, of which I was a part, investigates criminal violations of those tax laws.
And when did you start to, well, tell us how it all began. What made you first want to investigate the Internal Revenue Code yourself and not just take the manuals and the codes that you used when investigating tax evaders?
Well, in December of 1996, I was listening to the radio here in the Bay Area, and I heard a lady named D.V. Kidd come on the radio, and she started saying some very unbelievable things, like the income tax was voluntary, that the 16th Amendment was never ratified, and that that federal income taxes don't go towards providing revenue for the U.S. government. And I thought those claims were awfully outrageous, but she was talking about it on a radio show hosted by a man who I trusted, and that made me want to dig deeper and see what it was she was saying and what evidence she had to back it up.
Absolutely. And so, in 1996, you started investigating. How long did you investigate before you came to your conclusions?
A little over 2 years. So I basically my investigation ended right about the time I was forced to resign.
Can you tell us that story and also get into some of the things that you uncovered that are historical?
Well, I'd say after a good year and a half, I basically in my mind came to the realization that all her claims were correct, that in fact the income tax was voluntary, although it sounds kind of strange to be saying that, because we all know that people go to prison, they lose their homes, they have their wages garnished. But the reason that the IRS constantly refers to the income tax as being voluntary is because of our U.S. Constitution and the severe limitations that are placed on the federal government's ability to tax us. So,
there are only certain forms of constitutional taxation.
That's correct. That our income taxes do not, provide revenue as I always believed they did. It's more like a cash advance type system where the federal government borrows fiat money from the Federal Reserve, and then our income taxes are used as a vehicle to pay interest on that debt. Well, the printing of the money, another thing that I found out, which totally surprised me, was that they print the money and there's no value to it, and they, in a sense, print it and out of nothing. They make it out of nothing, simply because they have the power to force us to use the currency.
And it's kind of like a rat in a maze. And we never question the maze itself, never think outside the box. And that's why you're rare. Well, more and more people are in government standing up. This is becoming more and more clear, but it's still rare in the IRS, Mr. Banister, for somebody to actually pull back and see this. What was it like, let's say, a year into your studies? Because you say you studied for about 2 years before you finally made your decision with the evidence. What was it like about a year into it?
It was very difficult because I took the job thinking that I could use my financial skills to fight crime, go after the bad guys, and I did. Money launderers, drug smugglers. One particular case was even featured on America's Most Wanted, so I was really enjoying myself. So it really it shook my belief system to its very foundations, and was really very difficult for me to continue doing the job and excelling at it, because my mental state was difficult, to go to work every day, even though I wasn't daily, arresting tax evaders or people that didn't file tax returns. I wasn't personally doing that, But I still just felt it was very difficult to just go through the day-to-day process of the job knowing what I was finding out and not
because you found out that you were putting people in jail for something that the very system itself was doing.
At least the agency as a whole was doing that, and I felt that sooner or later I needed to start speaking out publicly because I felt, clearly a tax can only be voluntary or mandatory, and if it is voluntary, then it is wrong and illegal to prosecute, harass, seize money from people who don't volunteer.
Where does the money go? They throw this fiat money out there. We take the money up, and correct me if I'm wrong, we put labor into it, we work to attain it, and thus they steal our labor.
In a sense, that's correct. I mean, for quite some time, I'd hear D.V. Kidd talking about, the Federal Reserve and how we're slaves, and I didn't really understand what she meant. But when you really spend a little time and educate yourself on the way the process works, it's really very simple economics. And I don't have an economics degree or anything like that, but you can eventually see that when the source of the money supply is a bank and the destination of the money supply is a bank,
and the controller of the money supply is a bank, and the interest rates, that's total, complete monopoly. It's a money trust.
You basically have you can't get out of the slavery. You can't get out of the constantly increasing supply of money, which is another thing I noticed and never really thought about, is that although they constantly will tell you that we're trying to keep inflation under control, we're trying to minimize the effects of it, if you look at it over a period of decades, it's always going up. It never goes down or disappears. It's basically on an upward tilt forever and ever and ever. The economics of it, eventually, it ends up destroying the economy and the people in it.
You have to ask yourself, why would this global system want to do that? It's just all about power. It's modern colonialism.
Well, again, it's economic slavery, and it's something that it took me till the age of 35 to go out and do my own personal investigation to understand how it works. I never learned it at the university, didn't learn it on the CPA exam, didn't learn it in the Big 8 accounting firm, and certainly didn't learn it at the IRS.
That's right. You went to one of the biggest and best accounting schools.
Well, I worked 3 years at KPMG Pete Marwick, but I never was taught. I had to go out and learn it on my own, and luckily D.V. Kidd was on a radio station that I gave some credibility to. If I had heard her just on a street corner or at a meeting somewhere, I probably would have just kept on walking.
I mean, just basically, is there anything you want to say to the people in Austin, Texas, in Central Texas, people that tape this show and send it out to friends and family as well?
I guess the only thing I would say is I've seen evidence of an orchestrated campaign of painting a broad brush over people like Alex who really are telling you the truth. And I was one of those people that thought these were all kooky ideas, but I've come to realize that they are very true and very serious. And I'm very afraid for my own family, the Americans' ability to make a living, to have a country that has a manufacturing base, to have a future. Our country is close to being destroyed economically through the banking and monetary system. And it's about time that people realize that they're being lied to, and they should start listening to people like Alex, because he is telling you the truth. I've checked it out.
And then what happened when you tried to show this to your superiors?
Well, there came a point when I realized that what I had to do was consolidate all of my evidence and facts into a central location. So I decided to write a report, and it's very similar to what I do in the Treasury Department, which was I'd investigate an allegation, I'd go out and interview witnesses, gather evidence, gather documents, follow the paper trail, and then summarize all that evidence and present a report to my superiors, which would either recommend that the person be prosecuted or recommend that the investigation be discontinued because there was not enough evidence to sustain a prosecution. So I put that evidence together, and I submitted it to my immediate superior, and I asked that it be submitted right up the chain to Commissioner Rosati. I realized that what I was doing was going to rock the boat quite a bit, but I also knew that I had checked every one of these facts out and was over 100% certain of my findings. On February 8th of 1999 is actually the day that I submitted my report, and I asked that the commissioner or his designee commit in writing within 30 days to review my report. And I was only asking for a commitment. I didn't say I want all the answers in 30 days. Just commit to me. You'll look at it. I'm a federal law enforcement officer. I've sworn to support and defend the Constitution, and I really see some serious constitutional problems with the federal income tax. So that was February 8th. February 11th, it went to my boss's boss. And from February 11th to February 17th, it went all the way to 1111 Constitution Avenue in Washington, D.C.
And that's Rossetti's office.
That's where Rosati, his office is, as well as the Assistant Commissioner for Criminal Investigation. And I was told that my report not only went to Constitution Avenue, but at a minimum, the Assistant Commissioner for Criminal Investigation was aware of my report and the basics for what I was
Believe
presenting.
me, your report went right to Alan Greenspan. Or a word of it, a briefing did.
Well, it turns out that on let's see.
Well, see, that's the one thing they guard at the upper levels is the great evil. And the one thing they cannot deal with, that they cannot stop is credible people from within their system coming out against them. And now you're doing magazine interviews and radio interviews, and you've got the evidence, you've got your website up. Listen, what would you say, before we finish the story, what would you say to the other IRS agents and the other law enforcement out there about this? I mean, you've taken a real risk here in what you've done.
I'm taking an incredible risk, but I believe that the risk of doing nothing is even worse. What federal law enforcement officers need to realize, as well as every state and local officer, is that the laws that the IRS agents are enforcing, they shouldn't be enforcing. And I don't believe that they should be cooperated with. If somebody is being prosecuted for failing to file a tax return, and they have done the research and found that there is no requirement to file a tax return, then I feel it's morally and legally wrong, for that person to be pursued, investigated, and prosecuted.
You're saying it's color of law is what's being used. The whole thing's run out of ignorance. People just don't know. They really think, look at those kooks, those weirdos, those liars, until you investigate.
That's right, and I feel bad that I spent time thinking those things, but it was out of ignorance. And now that I've researched and found that a lot of those claims are actually true, my hope is that law enforcement people will start trusting the citizens more than they have, and the citizens, hopefully when they see more law enforcement officers being honorable about these issues, will start to trust law enforcement again, and we can get back to a country where there's a lot of trust between the government and the governed, because it's only with the consent of the governed that the government exists.
I'm trying to hope that you guys can tune out from the sports and the bedlam and the diversions for just 5 minutes and realize what we're trying to tell you here. What we're trying to wake you up. I mean, this is some scary stuff. I mean, I'll pay taxes. I've said this 100 times. But my gosh, let it go to me and my family. Let it go to the country. Let it go to defense of this nation. Let it be honest and based in a strong, good nation. But if it's going to private banks and they feed it back into the cycle of slavery and there's no way to get out of this debt pit. In fact, as an accountant, Mr. Banister, explain the whole debt pit. I mean, explain how there's no way to dig yourself out of this fiat system.
I mean, you basically said it right there. It is a pit, and you never get out. You pay interest. You pay the sweat of your brow barely pays the interest on the debt. It never goes away. It's like indentured servitude.
It's like indentured servitude.
It's literally, as you work, you keep hoping for the day that debt is paid off and you are free. But it'll never come with the system as it stands. I mean, I remember agents going to so-called tax protester meetings, to get intelligence and find out what's going on. And I remember them coming back and laughing at, the kooky stuff that they were talking about. And So that was just the general feeling that had been inculcated into people's minds. And it took me a couple of years to find out, but it in fact...
Now that's right. You talked about D.V. Kidd and other writers and her pamphlets and the executive orders they listed and the laws, the case law. What happened that first time whenever you went to the law library? Because you told that story on the radio, I thought it was interesting.
That I expected to find that it was all baloney, that they referred to court cases that didn't exist, or they took court cases out of context. And I found that every court case that she referred to, or any of the people that she had in her book list referred to, were correct, and they were right in the law library.
And how did that make you feel? I guess you wanted to dig deeper.
Yeah, because I had been taught, or at least led to believe, that I would immediately find the error of the evidence, that it wouldn't be there.
So they actually told you these guys are nothing but liars, you can't trust them.
Yeah, why bother looking? There's no sense in even looking into it, because it's a bunch of useless, out of context arguments that have been strung together, and they don't make any sense.
Mr. Banister, have you got any calls since you've gone public, been doing all these radio and magazine interviews? Have you got any calls back from the IRS?
No, but I do have a lot of support within the IRS. There's, like I said, there's a lot of good people in there, and they are supportive of me. Of course, there's some that don't understand, but I haven't read any of the evidence either.
So you're a good example. Again, I mean, if you realize what you've done here, it's so good. If we can convince the people in the mechanisms of enforcement that they're enforcing something that's criminal, we can try to get back to that constitutional form of taxation and have a strong country.
Well, I don't know if you're probably familiar with a gentleman named Jack McLam.
Yes, Police Against the New World Order.
I understand that he's not well liked by government officials, and I've met him a number of times, and I find him to be a very gentle man, and somebody that just wants the Constitution to be followed.
He's not a criminal. He's a highly decorated Vietnam veteran, the most highly decorated police officer in Phoenix, Arizona history, and he was at the top. I mean, they loved him in the community. They were talking about him going for chief, all the rest of this stuff, and finally he found out about drug running and things and corruption and tried to speak about it, and he got fired.
And the thing about Jack is he's got a little saying that tyranny will come to your door in a uniform. And I can't think of a more true statement, and especially coming from me, who kicked down a lot of doors and did a lot of search warrants and searched through a lot of drawers and files and under beds, that's exactly how tyranny will come to your home, is in a uniform or with a bulletproof vest on or with a 6 Sauer 9mm as I carried.
And again, it's up to you guys out there in America, the police, the SWAT team commanders. You want to ask yourselves, is it the crack dealer on the corner, or is it the white-collar criminal that you're worried about, the guy that's selling old ladies junk bonds? Or is it just the family that can't put the kids through school because of the federal income tax that goes right to the Federal Reserve? Again, that's true. Private, run for profit. You know, we've aired the actual training videos the IRS has, or pieces of it, where they admit that it goes right to the Federal Reserve. In fact, more and more, they're just admitting the truth, aren't they? They're just flagrantly out there flapping it in our faces.
Well, a lot of what I found is, actually all of what I found is publicly available, and the number of times that you see the word voluntary in the IRS manuals and in their pamphlets and booklets and instructions, I found it to be incredible.
So the king has no clothes.
That's what I found.
In fact, I think that's what we'll call this piece. The king has no clothes. Joe, anything else? And God bless you. You know, Joe worked hard today at the accounting firm he's working at, and we were in Northern California covering Operation Urban Warrior. Oh my gosh! And we called Joe up, and he met us right after work here at this little restaurant. Joe, any other points?
Again, just don't let people be painted with a broad brush where you're scared into not listening to what they have to say. D.V. Kidd, Bill Benson, Bill Conklin, Jack McLam, and many, many others are fine people, and they really have seen some very ugly underside of certain portions of our government. And I'm not anti-government. I'm not anti-tax. Alex is not. None of the people are. Yeah, they are anti-corruption, though, and I'm anti-corruption. And
well, that's the sad part. You sit there and you try to talk about corruption, police running drugs, which we talked about, election fraud. Remember that at the county? And then it comes out it's true months after we bring it out, and nothing's done. We're denied, being on the committee. We get called anti-government, black helicopter people, all the rest of this stuff. And it's only because, well, number one, I get a thrill out of standing up against corruption. I think that's the same thrill you got. I mean, it feels good, and I guess it did feel bad to find out that you've been led along.
That's the reason I took the job. I could use my financial skills to find the fraud, to chase after the bad guys who don't actually get their fingers dirty with the crime. But the money ends up flowing, and you follow the money.
The puppet masters that create the havoc.
And that's, you find who's running the show when you follow the money.